I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. This is, I believe, the 10th anniversary of the National Book Award Festival here at Sam Houston. And I always like to give a shout out and a thanks to Amanda Nolan O'Banion, who used to work at the university, and she's responsible for actually starting this here. And it's a great opportunity for students to really have some sort of interaction with some of the highest caliber writers writing right now. So I'd like to thank her. I always go so fast, I'll end up missing somebody that I mean to thank. So I want to make sure I don't do that this year. I really, really want to thank Deanna, hi Deanna, Brittany, Jaron, Lindsay, and Tiffany, all for being the workhorses for this event, with the planning, the actual logistics of everything. I'm very, very thankful, and if I don't say it enough, I'm saying it now. I also really, really, of course, want to thank Dean Lee, the Dean of CHSS, for his continuing support of this event. We couldn't do it without his support. I'm so happy that he at least sees that it is an opportunity, and hopefully we can continue the vision for it. I also want to thank Natalie Green from the National Book Foundation. You'll hear from her in just a sec. But to trust us with having an event that is affiliated with the foundation, I'm very, very thankful of that, and for entrusting me to sort of help coordinate this. I also want to thank the students and the faculty in our creative writing program, building a kind of culture where writing matters is something that I think is really, really important. And I think every student and every faculty member involved in that, though they have their own ways sometimes of doing it, I think they all care greatly about what it is that they do and that their students do. And it's important, and I can see that culture growing. So, thank you everyone, and I would like to now introduce Natalie Green from the National Book Foundation. Let's give her a round of applause.
How are y'all doing? Yeah, thanks so much for coming out tonight. It means a lot. Like Jake said, my name is Natalie Green. I'm the Director of Programs and Partnerships at the National Book Foundation. I'm thrilled to join Jake and welcome you to this evening's event. Thanks to all of the incredible women that Jake named, Brittany, Deanna, Jaron, Lindsay, and Tiffany, and Sam Houston State's College of Humanities and MFA program for their 10 years of partnership, and really for making this event possible from top to bottom. We're so happy to be back at Sam Houston to celebrate National Book Award honored authors and their work. Some of you might be familiar with the National Book Foundation as the presenter of the National Book Awards, which has honored the best literature published in the United States for 75 years. I know we look really good for our age. It's our birthday. And we hope you can all join us to celebrate and party on November 20th. You can all tune in to the National Book Awards ceremony, which is broadcast free for readers everywhere online, and that's where we'll announce this year's National Book Award winners from the stage. You can register to watch at nationalbook.org/awards, and we also have our e-newsletter sign up on the book sales table, so please give us your info and we'll keep you up to date with all things awards and events near you, and we'd love to stay in touch. In addition to our year-round education and public programs, which reach readers of all ages with free books and topical events, we also work with Sam Houston on our internship program, hosting a stellar SHSU student each summer in our New York office. This summer, we had the luck of working with Blea Patterson, who's an MFA candidate and poet born and raised in Texas. Yes, I know, I love Blea. What a treat that was. Tonight, we're celebrating National Book Award honored authors Anthony Cody, Shing, Khor, and LaToya Watkins. You'll get to hear readings from each author and a conversation moderated by the brilliant Lacy M. Johnson, who's based just a drive away down the road in Houston and is a professor, curator, activist, and author. We'll save some time at the end and open up to a few audience questions, so please go ahead and raise your hand and Lacy will call upon you. And we'll run a microphone over to you so everybody can hear your great question. Following the event, we'll move to a table in the back of the room for signing, and many thanks to the Sam Houston Bookstore for having all of these books available for sale tonight. And now I'm delighted to introduce the folks on stage. Anthony Cody is the author of The Rendering and Borderland Apocrypha. For his work, he has been awarded a Whiting Award, an American Book Award, a Southwest Book Award, as well as named a finalist for a National Book Award, a Penn Gene Stein Book Award, and a Los Angeles Times Book Prize, among others. He was honored as a 2020 Poets and Writers Debut Poet. Anthony is from Fresno, California, with a lineage in the Bracero program and Dust Bowl. Anthony is co-publisher of Naomi Press, a poetry editor for Omnidon, and is currently visiting professor of poetry at Iowa Writers Workshop. Shing Khor is an Eisner and Ignatz award-winning graphic novelist, Indiecade award-winning game designer, and wooden marionette builder based in Los Angeles, California, by way of Malaysia. Their first full-length graphic novel memoir, The American Dream, A Journey on Route 66, was one of NPR's 2019 Best Books of the Year. Their second graphic novel, The Legend of Auntie Poe, was a National Book Award finalist. LaToya Watkins' writing has appeared in A Public Space, The Sun, McSweeney's, Kenyon Review, and elsewhere. She has received support for her work from the Camargo Foundation, McDowell, Yaddo, and Hedgebrook. Her latest book is Holler Child, which was longlisted for the National Book Award for Fiction. And our moderator, Lacy M. Johnson, is a Houston-based professor, curator, activist, and the author of The Reckonings and The Other Side, both National Book Critics Circle Award finalists, and Trespasses. She is editor with the designer Cheryl Beckett of More City Than Water, a Houston Flood Atlas. She teaches creative nonfiction at Rice University and is the founding director of the Houston Flood Museum. Enjoy the program.
I think we're going to begin with a short reading. Anthony, would you start us?
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you all for being here tonight. I'm going to start by reading two poems from the opening section of my book. It was inspired by a conversation that took place at a Walgreens about a decade ago. Standing in line to take a passport photo, an old white man looks at me and claims I am running. Standing here because my grandpa ran away from home to sell perfume in El Zocalo at 9. In line, I am a lot of things, and since I am a lot of things, I am everything he cannot imagine. A passport photo asks me to 2x2 myself and capture what I am in neutral. And I recall I have yet to see the chambers of my heart turn tusk. An old white man is not Gil Scott Heron saying, because I always feel like running, not away, because there is no such place, is not how you pronounce exile or escapar. Looks at me how Teddy Roosevelt died coveting a white buffalo, claims I am afraid. No, I am a wall. No, I am a mirror. I am still, so still. A passport photo asks me to 2x2 myself and capture what I am in neutral, and I recall I have yet to see the chamber of my heart turn tusk. A passport photo should be mailed to the federal government with my birth certificate, and I wonder if they will return. Consider the power of printed paper. Asks me daily, am I brown? Am I white? Am I? I am. Am I? I am. Am I? I am. I am. I wonder when the tense transitions. 2 by 2 myself, a neat shape, raises no questions and tells you no lies. Capture what I am in neutral. I have yet to see a sunrise in the shadow or a child birth itself from inside of a Joshua tree, and this does not mean it is not possible. The chamber of my heart is a quiet, the outside of a pulse driving into a fire. Turn tusk, turn dusk, turn day, turn lingua, turn franca, turn lingua, turn español, turn sombra, así, atrás, allí, acá, to here, yes, here, yes, here, it is dark. Thank you.
All right, I believe I'm next. This will be a slight tonal shift because I am a graphic novelist. So look at the images, not at me, because I will not be more interesting. Let's see. Slide. There you go. Logging a forest is like a dance. The loggers slide past each other, and sharp blades and soft humans and heavy logs jostle for space. Paulie's a bore, but he's good at his job. Do you ever wish you could work out there with them? It's very dangerous. B, are you listening to me? Yeah? What are you even looking at? Oh, who? Who are you looking at? The new boy. We just came down from Wisconsin, and he's from a logging family just like me. Dad says that he's a natural leader. He's young, but the men trust him. Dad says he'll be a foreman in 2 or 3 years, if he doesn't die first. May? You said it's a dangerous job. What's gotten into you? I'm going for a walk. I need to get kindling for the stoves. I can go with you. No, thanks. Why do I feel so bad? B is just confiding in me about normal girl things. I should like that. I don't like it. Sorry, the next couple pages are just going to be me making sounds. Ugh. Ugh. Hi. I hear you've been telling stories about me. Yes, but I made you up. You're just a story. Wait, I can make things real with my brain? Be careful, Ame. It will be difficult. Okay, you didn't answer my question. Wait, what do I need to be careful for? Next page. Wait, I have questions. Ugh, even the gods I invent aren't that useful. I wish B could see this. And then you've got Auntie Poe putting together a bunch of kindling for me. Thank you. That's also, thank you. That is also the end.
I am going to read an excerpt from one of the stories in my collection, Cutting Horse. This horse that done made her way to my yard got a shiny coat. Somebody take good care of her, but that don't mean she don't know she captive. She been working on that same patch of grass since I opened the gate and let her back here. She ain't no gypsy horse like the ones I love breeding. Them still the most beautiful beasts to me. All that mane look like ponytails all over their bodies. And we kept ours looking fresh, like they was for shows or something. We paid a hood beautician, Lulu Shepherd, good money to come out and style and condition their mane every week. And we fed them like kings. But they wasn't no real show horses. We couldn't be part of that world. We just rode them and showed them off in our hood, riding the kids, Juneteenth parades, and birthday parties on the east side. They made our folks happy, feel like somebody's sometimes. The illegitimacy of our business might have kept us out of the show world, but it didn't keep them good old boys from buying my gypsies. My horses was everything. This one looked like a quarter. Them some nice horses, too. News folks say all 7 of them cutting horses. I wonder if the city news reporters even know what cutting about, that it's more than competitions and stuff. I wonder if the owners even know how important cutting was out on the open range. Folks around here think cutting all about sport, but that ain't where it started. Cutting horse born to judge, to discern, and most folks like them around the corner got them sitting under some panel being judged. Cutting horse know which cattle need branding or sick or any other thing a cow can't open his mouth and say. Know how to read other beasts and move their minds, master them. My granddaddy used to say, you make your horse your friend, not your servant. That way they want to do stuff for you. Horse don't want no master because they masters all on their own, especially cutters. Them folks, the ones looking for the horse and the ones reporting it stole, don't know how much this horse know, how much she discern. They don't know, she know they hearts. I wonder what made them horses leave the way they did. On the news, they played a video somebody took. Them horses crossed Raleigh Road, and that ain't no low-traffic street, but they crossed it without a care in the world. I mean, they busted out the fence and ran pretty to the empty lot next to the Shell gas station across the street from their ranch. Them cars was going crazy, too, pulling over, getting out, snapping pictures like they ain't never seen no horse. That's it.
Thank you. Thank you all so much, and thank you for being here. Let's get one more hand, a round of applause for our readers, our honorees tonight. So the theme for tonight's event is Borders of Literature, right? And I wonder if we could just begin there by speaking a little bit about this. In each of your works, borders, whether they are political, historical, temporal, cultural, or interpersonal maybe, even like between what is and isn't the self, history, what is and isn't history, and what is and isn't freedom. All these borders are created, navigated, and sometimes violently enforced. They are sources of generational trauma and conflict, as well as intersection and overlap. So I wonder if you could each of you could speak a little bit about how you think about your work in the context of tonight's theme.
For me, I think of bordering as a separator, right? As something that we can distinguish in a violent way of us and them. So when I think through my work and thinking through a project like Violences of the Southwest after the Treaty of Hidalgo and the acquisition of so much of the West, one of the things I was thinking about is how do I fracture that and sort of reenact, fracture it so we let things in, make it permeable, invite others, invite the histories back in that have historically been put outside that border and forgotten or omitted or obfuscated.
Yeah, I'll go. So for me, a lot of this book came out of, what we consider to be mythic Americana. Like this book came out of an obsession with Paul Bunyan. And Paul Bunyan as a story has such deep roots in what we think of as white America, even if it was very frequently white immigrant America. And as I dug more into this research, it became really clear to me that there were so many Black people, Native people, Asian people in the logging camps at the time, and yet the character of Paul Bunyan, as the American myth, was so extremely white and tall and beardy. So much of this book is about investigating, the borders of myth-making, and who gets to tell these stories and who gets to who gets to make myths. So that's what I think of a lot.
I think for me, with this book, it is about limitation and, in many ways, invisibility. And there is this way that we know borders are there. There are these boundaries or these limits that we can't see. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the characters that I create have these borders that are limiting them from doing something, and they are, in a sense, the invisible people of their spaces. So I think that's what it came from for me, the invisibility and the limitation.
Great, thank you so much. And I think also, and I'm interested maybe for the two of you in particular, in sort of thinking about you're engaging so explicitly with history and with the past, but there are also so many ways, like as I was reading, the present kept intruding. And I wonder whether you might speak to the ways that yours collapse these distinctions between events that are supposedly past and these moments of the present.
Yeah, for me, when I set out to do like so much of the archival research, my imagination, my sort of conceit of the project was thinking through it very small. I was thinking I was going to write a book about like 1848, 1850s America. And in that research, what I kept finding is that it kept sort of mirroring back the now. And each time I would go back to the archive and sort of pull that thread, it just became more and more present, so much so that I started, there's people in here from like 2 administrations ago. There's also moments where I also started seeing how the state project of the carceral and police state have sort of manifested from the lynch mob to the sheriff's association. And suddenly I'm writing and understanding in a different way what happens when someone is murdered by police, right? So I couldn't extract the past and the present. It made me really consider time as sort of stacked on itself. Versus something that happens more linear.
Thank you.
I'm going to read like a little bit from the end of my author's note because I think it addresses this really well.
Yeah, thanks.
Researching working class Chinese in lumber camps is not easy. And then I talk a little bit about the research. But ultimately, where I took liberties with history, I chose to do so because when our histories have been repressed and our people were not deemed worthy enough to document, I feel that we have the obligation to return ourselves to the narrative. If history failed us, fiction will have to restore us. And the reason I wrote that is because I was doing a lot of historical research, and a lot of it simply was not there. Like, there is one academic book devoted to Chinese labor in logging camps in the 1800s. And blue-collar work at this time, especially for Chinese people, especially given the language barriers, there is no documentation of this. So a lot of it is I was forced to insert my present experiences. And part of that is, we have a lack of documentation of like queer people throughout history. So part of inserting the present into this book, and it felt especially important for me to do it in a children's book. It felt like a restoration of people who've always been there, like queer people, So it felt necessary, but also I didn't have quite as much past to draw on as one might think.
Sure, but I'm also interested in your book in particular in the way that mythology sometimes functions to intervene in these historical gaps and erasures, particularly the sort of mythologies of how mythology functions also as a history, as a way of narrating history, particularly for those who may have been marginalized or overlooked or erased, right? and I'm thinking about how May's storytelling in particular blurs the line between history and cultural memory. Can you talk a little bit more about sort of how that comes to, how mythology may have come to fill that gap there?
Yeah, I mean, mythology is how us as humans have always attempted to organize the world.
Yeah.
Like every culture has a mythology. And in America, I was so drawn to the legend of Paul Bunyan because it felt like the only, like, absolutely true American myth. Like the only true mythic figure. Like, yes, we have John Henry, we have Johnny Appleseed, but all of these were based in groups of people or a real person, like Johnny Appleseed was a real person. And Paul Bunyan as a mythic figure was so compelling to me. I'm sorry, I'm gonna get like a little bit nerdy about
Please.
Paul Bunyan here for a bit.
That's why we're all here.
So, Paul Bunyan as a figure was born out of oral history in logging camps. However, the first people to document the Paul Bunyan myths, to put them on paper in books, were all largely educated people. Like the first person to write a paper about Paul Bunyan myths was like a 20-year-old college student who co-wrote it with her college advisor. And she even admits in that, going out into logging camps, she's like, yeah, I wasn't gonna get the filthy stories. So we've already lost a lot of Paul Bunyan stories that were, theoretically pretty dirty. I mean, a bunch of working class men telling stories about like a 24-foot tall lumberjack. Like, these were not clean stories. So we've lost those. And then if you think the second layer of that, what were the stories that we lost because, the people who documented them were white and educated? We've lost the working class perspective. We've lost, the Black and Native perspective from that time period. And it's fascinating to me to look back at the evolution of the Bunyan myth. There's a version in Minnesota it's kind of a Native American variation. It's the death of Paul Bunyan, where one of their gods, Nanabozo, kills Paul Bunyan with a walleye trout. But that's part of the joy of mythology. There is no singular myth. It is something that that different groups of people get to play with. Mm-hmm. Like, we get to make our own myths, and that was what was so exciting about making this book for me.
Great, thank you. And LaToya, I want to call you in here too, because I think that one of the things that I find so interesting about your work is around, I found myself asking, or that it seemed to invite me to interrogate who gets to be mythologized, who gets to sort of have the larger story of themselves be the one that is told. Maybe you could speak to that a little bit.
One of the things that was important to me with this collection, even though it is kind of a present-day collection, I found the stories, the ideas for the stories in the slave narratives from the WPA project that was 6 decades after emancipation. And you had all of these relationships between family members in these narratives that were explored. And there's also, the Library of Congress has this really great version where you can hear some of them. So hearing their voices and understanding what was happening in the room, that a lot of times these people couldn't say what they really wanted to say, the things that were missing, there were stories or people that they talked about in the narratives that were interesting to me, that were no longer here to tell their stories, but they had become kind of myths or legends to the people that they left behind, or to the people that lost them during their after emancipation. So those became the stories that were important to me, the things that I wasn't. The people who didn't get to tell their stories were the ones that became the myths. Even in some of my research, I went to a lot of churches, and I talked to a lot of women because the men would speak to me and they were friendly, but they didn't tell stories like women did. But a lot of the characters the people that they like to talk about were men. They like to talk about other people's business. So it was the people that they talked about where I found the stories, because I think that those were the people that I never got to meet were like the legends or the myths or the people who were able to create like the beliefs or ideologies that the people who were telling these stories, even way back in the 1930s, in these narratives, those were kind of the people that created the belief systems and ideologies.
That's fantastic. I mean, I wonder, one of the things that I also noted there in my reading that I remember noticing is, you know, I teach nonfiction, I teach memoir writing. I mentioned earlier, I'm teaching memoir writing right now, right? And one of the things I talk with my students about is how one form of truth in memoir is a matter of acknowledging the ways that memory is not linear, right? And sometimes arrives in an unwelcome way that asks us to re-experience it in the present. And there's so much of that quality in your characters speaking, in their narration. Do you think some of that, I mean, can you talk about that? Is that coming a little bit from the kind of oral quality of the storytelling of these narratives that came up in your research, or is that just this sort of method writing that you were speaking about earlier?
I think it does come from both, the oral quality, because the research that I done, the people that I talked to, nothing was written down unless they were handing me a Bible to see the lineage, which kind of became was the truth for them. So I think everyone's truth was a little bit different. Sometimes stories conflict, and you kind of, I found myself trying to decide or assign what was real and what wasn't in what I was being told. And I think that's where the story was, for me, the graying of what is true and what isn't.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm interested in hearing more about your research, but I want to open it up to the others up here too, of you know, all of these works seem really deeply researched. Research seemed to be a really important part of your process for each of you. So maybe you could talk a little bit more about your research process. Was there anything surprising that you discovered? Or alternately, maybe other moments where the historical record felt limiting?
Yeah, it kind of it dovetails from that last question. And one of the things that I was very familiar with was being in California, in the Central Valley of California, is the myth of Joaquin Murrieta, a sort of Pancho Villa, Robin Hood character. And in my research, I'm going through reading this story, and it's a story I'd sort of internalized. Every year, actually, there's a sort of a parade across the Central Valley to reenact the trail. And it wasn't until I'm looking at it and I'm reflecting, I'm like, oh, if this is someone who did or did not exist, I do not know. But more importantly, in that myth making and this popular narrative, I had totally omitted the reality, or the reality was omitted to me, that he was actually, if he existed, was lynched. And that part of the story was just part of like the lore of this figure. And I'm like, okay, wait, we have to like unpack this. So some of it was in working through the archive, almost an unlearning, right, of trying to understand what is truth, what was the truth, even something like the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, which we all refer to it that way. The actual title is like the structures of colonialism. It's peace, freedom, limits, and settlement. That's the actual title of the treaty. And I think about that, like that's like classic, hey, I'm here, we'll be friends. No, let's put limits on that. And by the way, actually, no, you need to leave and we're gonna take up camp in here. And so these were sort of the things that were happening for me while I was going through the archive, going through these histories, looking at different states' histories even, of how maybe things didn't correlate or were blurry or like pushing against each other. that were really helpful to sort of unpack all of the knowledge that I did and did not know, and the ways in which I was perceiving it sort of as an Irish Mexican, of thinking through, like, who would I have been? Who were my ancestors in that time when the border crossed my grandmother in Arizona, or my, or potentially like white family members in the middle of Oklahoma, right? So trying to unlearn that and understand that better.
Yeah, for me, I had, 5 years of just sort of self-interested research before the idea for this book even hit. I wasn't trying to write a graphic novel. I was just interested in Chinese labor in the 1800s and Paul Bunyan. It was just a weird obsession that I had. But what really struck me and what led me to this book was, so doing research into the history of any marginalized group is a traumatic process. Like, you are largely, researching dead, lynched people who get set on fire for being different. And one of the books I was reading, it's Iris Chang's book, she committed suicide at age 29 because she got really depressed doing this work. And what actually led me to this book is I was reading that one book on Chinese labor in logging camps. It's by Su Fan Chung, called Chinese in the Woods. And it was talking about Chinese cooks in logging camps. And what really struck me is she was talking about how Chinese cooks were so deeply valued in logging camps because loggers were working, 16-hour days. If the food wasn't good, then they quit. So the food had to be good. And Chinese cooks were just so well known that they were getting paid more than white cooks. There was an incident that is mirrored in this book where they'd gotten fired, white cooks stepped in, and the white cooks could not cook as much. They could not do the work, and all the Chinese cooks had to be hired back. And it was a strangely joyful, it was a joyful fact to encounter in a research process that mostly involved, Chinese people dying. And here was this fact that was these people were valued. These people were paid more. There was a cook, Tai Sing, for the National Geographic Survey, who did a lot of cooking for the Mather expeditions, which later led to the formation of the National Park Service. And he has a mountain in Yosemite named after him. And that mountain was only named after him, I think, 15 years after the Chinese Exclusion Act. So I ended up writing a book about really Chinese cooks, because after all that research, that was the one spark of joy that I found.
I think for me, the surprising thing was that in my research that I think I set out to look at, there was a story that I'd read after I kind of figured out who I wanted to write about, for a couple of the stories about a news story about a cult in West Texas. So I started kind of focusing on Christianity and cult culture, all of these things. And I was connected with someone in a small who had escaped a small West Texas cult, and I was able to sit down and talk to them. And by the time I finished that conversation, I wasn't as interested in the cult as I was in where this person came from, how this person ended up giving up everything that they owned to this really charismatic leader who just living in squalor. So I went to those places and found the people in the town that this person would come to, and ended up visiting all of these small West Texas towns, based on my interest in this person's origins, and the book became about something. So there's one story, the first story in there that came directly from that research, but that it took me to so many different places is the thing that surprised me. I started looking at cowboys, black cowboys, and county seats in West Texas when they were founded. Just so many things that I never thought would be interesting to me that were.
I'm so glad that you brought that up, because one of the things I really love about your work is the loving way that you write about place and these places in Texas. I wonder if you could just sort of also talk a little bit about sort of why that geographical specificity is so important, and like how you engage with it in your writing. Maybe just sort of like how place informs your work as a writer. This place specifically, this place we call Texas, how it informs your work as a writer and your writing process.
I'm from Texas. I've always lived here, and there was a time when I only wanted to get out. I only wanted to get away. So when I started doing the work, of research. I was in grad school, and I didn't know that I would be a writer. I thought I was a historian. So I started doing the work of looking at different areas of Texas. Again, I was looking at religion. There were all of these different Texas or southern things that I was looking at, but I was looking at it in Texas. And my family is from West Texas, but is from Lubbock, but I didn't live there long. So I definitely didn't identify with myself as a West Texan. So traveling that highway, going back to those places I'm a person who needs to put my feet in the soil, who needs to visit courthouses and churches and just talk to people, listen to their voices. I began to feel differently about the land. So I've lived in all over Texas, so I drove a lot of Texas, and I want to write about all of her, but I started there because that's where I started.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to open that question up to both of you too, like how you think about how place informs your work and your writing process, and maybe even the sort of like the place from which you write. And you can be literal and talk about your desk, or you can talk about, that sort of more metaphorical way of thinking about the places that we carry inside us.
I think for me, in thinking through like place, I think through like my own like identity displacement of being both like white and Mexican, and trying to like navigate those two, of never being enough of either, right? Like I remember in the middle of this project, a friend of mine, I shared the work, and he said, "What are you doing writing in Spanish? That's not even your like native tongue." And I thought, you're right, but also Spanish is also the language of the colonizer too. So like me taking back that identity of also trying to use it and bend it in a purpose to like shine a light on places of the Southwest felt like something for me that like brought me a lot of like joy of being able to do that and kind of refract some of those harms, and also my own like traumas of like trying to understand my own identity is like growing up, and who am I as a writer, who should I be, or who am I not, who should I be. So I definitely think about place in that way. And one of the things I always was very mindful of in traveling parts of the Southwest and being and visiting maybe sites of violences, of lynchings, of how easy it is for us to like recast a place in like a positive light. There's a poem in here where it's talks about a lynching tree in Texas, and that there's TripAdvisor things about terrible history, lovely tree, great picnic, You know, we had such a great time there. And that was kind of like thinking about how we detach our like meanings in place to sort of make it more palatable. And that's definitely how I think of place, of trying to like honor the true histories of this place, and while also being mindful of, you know, this isn't my place. There were indigenous communities here before these histories were written.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I've never really thought of myself as an author who really wrote much about place, although recently someone pointed out that most of my work is about California, but the outer edges of California where I don't actually live. And I think, you know, I'm an immigrant. I've spent a lot of my early adolescence just moving around. And I think more than a specific sense of place, my work is about the feeling of constantly feeling displaced. Like the family in this book, you know, they're an immigrant family in a logging camp for a brief period of time. Like at the end of the book, they leave it. And my other books are, you know, about road trips where it's inherently, you know, you're passing through all these strange liminal spaces. So, in a sense, I feel like a lot of my work is about trying to find that sense of home, which is, I'm sort of realizing that I've now lived in Los Angeles for 20 years, and it's going to be as much home as anything else. But yeah, a lot of my work is about trying to find that place. And, you know, the flippant answer as to why I write books about forest rather than about Los Angeles where I live is just that drawing trees and drawing cars, drawing trees are a lot easier.
Thank you. I want to go back to something that you're saying, Anthony, about language. And, you know, I'm mindful also of the ways that in each of these books you are engaging with the sort of challenges of representing language, of using language. Language is broken in various ways, or is unrepresentable or fails to represent. So maybe you could just speak about that a little bit too, the sort of thinking about how you render language on the page.
Yeah, for me, my grandparents, we lived in an intergenerational house. So a lot of my Spanish is like adolescent, like where to go get the pot, what you didn't do right, clean this up. Which you know, my English skills have far outpaced that going to college, et cetera, et cetera. But there's still an emotional gravity to language for me that I hear a word in Spanish and it strikes a chord that English will never strike for me. Like if bone, I say bone, we hear it. But also, I feel something very clinical for me. But if I say hueso, there's a resonance there, both in like the sound and the double syllable, in the two syllables, but also in that weight of the language. I can like feel and hear my grandparents talk. I can feel like sort of a lineage that I'm trying to reach toward that for me carries a cultural and emotional resonance that I can't ever achieve in English. And it's sort of that dexterity of, is there a weight to a word in English that's hollow versus a weight in Spanish that is maybe has a little bit more gravity? And that's something for me that's personal, right? Like, you know, I don't expect anyone to pick that up when they're reading the work, but I know when I utter it, I'm also like speaking into the existence, like the lineage that I come from. And that means something to me.
This is a slight digression, but I have a 6-foot skeleton in my house. It just kind of hangs out, and we used to call him Mr. Bones. But as he's just felt more dignified, we've actually been calling him Señor Huesos, in a way that it does feel more dignified. You're right. So sorry.
Perfect. Love it.
Back to the actual topic. So for me, I actually ended up making a sort of strange mistake while writing this book. So my family speaks several Chinese dialects, but we are of a newer immigrant generation than what I write about in this book. Like, we immigrated in the 80s. The book is largely about immigration during the 1800s. We immigrated during the 90s. Oh my God, math is hard. But Anyway, so my family speaks Hokkien and Mandarin, and when I was writing the dialogue in this book, I'd written it in Mandarin. And then later, I was like, wait, no, immigration during the 1800s of Chinese people was largely Cantonese. They spoke Cantonese. So fortunately, I didn't have to make that much of a switch because the characters are the same. But I had to, you know, all the Chinese handwriting in this book is actually my mother's because I can't write Chinese. I don't even speak it all that well. So I had, you know, it was a cute little text conversation where I would be like, Mom, I need you to translate this for me. She has credit as a translator in this book. It's her writing. And I actually chickened out reading this book to a middle school today, where there's actually English and Cantonese translations in the book. And I was going to read them in Cantonese as well, and then I was like, I don't speak Cantonese. I actually will mispronounce this terribly. But part of that translation is, you know, in English, it translates as like dinner time. And in Cantonese, it's like sekfan, which is the literal translation is a lot closer to like eat rice. But another thing about language that we ran into is trying to figure out how to represent kind of dialect-inflected English as spoken by, you know, an immigrant speaking broken English, because we wanted to represent it in a way that wasn't offensive and insulting. And, you know, to me, I was like, we can't misspell words. You know, we can't recreate that. So what my editor and I ended up agreeing on is for the father who speaks a broken English, we actually, I guess, improve his English a little bit. We don't misspell words, but we keep the cadence of Chinese, of like a Chinese, you know, someone who speaks Chinese as a first language, kind of who's taken on English as a secondary or third language. But it's something, you know, I'm still navigating. Like every time I read this out loud, I'm like, how do I do the father's accent? Even though my dad does sound like that, I'm like, it still feels very awkward in my mouth.
Yeah.
I think for me, it's important, the language, and kind of staying true to the characters. I'll never forget one of the first stories that I wrote and read aloud. I tried to read it in like a kind of proper English, and I shaved off the black vernacular because I didn't know that it was okay for me to code switch in front of an audience. And it was horrible. It was a terrible story when I read it that way because the characters didn't feel real. And I remember I had read Henry Louis Gates' The Signifying Monkey, which was dated by the time that I read it. And I had written a story kind of in Zora Neale Hurston's kind of black vernacular, and went into the dialect, and I went into a workshop, and the facilitator tore me up. He was just like, this is out of practice, you don't do this, learn how to, if you're gonna render language in this way, learn how to do it. So what I did was, I'm a first generation college graduate. I grew up in a home where that's all everyone spoke was black vernacular, but I didn't want my kids to speak that. So I would correct their text, I would do all of these things, and I went home and I was like, okay, from now on, we're gonna speak how, you know, grandma speaks. Like we're gonna talk like that at home. So I started embracing it at home first, and then I started studying the regional differences, going to places, listening to the way that people spoke, and writing it down, using the dialect when I write it, but not using it when I render a story, and becoming comfortable with speaking it in reading as well, so that I'm not misspelling things or using accents, but everything is as it should be.
So a writer, a historian, and a linguist. Amazing. All right, I have one more question, and then I'm going to open up to some questions from y'all. And this question is maybe sort of a selfish one, as a writer myself. I'm just thinking about if you could talk a little bit about other practices that you have that help sustain your writing practice, and maybe also more broadly what you do to care for yourself as you write, and thinking about it, engaging with these difficult histories, these histories of violence, of genocide, of murder. How do you care for yourself as you engage with these histories, and what other practices help sustain your writing?
I would, the shortest answer is I don't. I'm like, I am in many ways the buffalo careening through the archive. But but I'm mindful of like the idea, and this came up in our conversation earlier, a craft talk, that I was mindful of that, of the work, of the labor, I have an obscene level of tolerance to like attack on me. It's more like fuel for the fire to keep going. But I also know that that's not a sustainable practice. So actually, inside of my books are sort of, I try as the book goes on, somewhere towards the end, to write in like spells and energies and cures and curas to like have that energy to go forward. Because there's going to be something else tomorrow, right? There's going to be, we don't know the fight we know the fight we're fighting today, we don't know the fight we're fighting tomorrow. So I always think about that, of like, how do I like cast a spell to get California woo-woo here in the work. Also, my friendships with other writers. I've been very fortunate to have really close friends, mentors, who I can talk to about some of like the harder things. And that's been like tremendous to be able to like learn from people who've been doing it for decades. And then in terms of what I do to like find like a hobby or something else, I collect pottery. I go around and pick through thrift stores, and really it informs my work because I'm really interested in the shapes that we make with our hands, right? These are things manually made, organic shapes, and I think about that and how that informs some of the things in my work, the shape of a line, the shape of a turn in a poem, what that looks like tangibly. So yeah, thrifting and witchcraft.
All right.
I love this. So right now, my self-care thing is pottery. So if you want a pot, I'll send you a pot. But there's just something so magical and intuitive about just sticking your hands in mud and like making a little guy. And I've been going to a lot of museums lately and just seeing like a long lineage of humans just making weird little guys. So that's been my little self-care thing. But generally, I'm a really distractible person. Like, I've got ADHD. Like, I couldn't be a full-time, I'm going to write and research genocide, like, multiple hours a week, even if I wanted to, because my body wants to do other things. So my current obsession is hand carving wooden marionettes. I went to Prague last year to study how to carve wooden marionettes, and I'm kind of getting into puppeteering. Rest of my time, I actually burnt out really, really hard after doing this book, and I spent 2 years just exploring a career shift where I now am also designing analog board games. And now I'm back to writing because I've had the break. And I think a lot of my kind of dealing with writing, dealing with self-care process is just experimentation. Like, I like experimenting with new things, and I think I just need it to kind of keep me grounded and sane. I am back to like working on books now because I really do need the next chunk of my advance. So.
I'm like Anthony. I'm not always good about the self-care, but I used to be a runner, but I'm getting old, so that doesn't, I'm not able to do that as much, but I take long walks, and I like midnight, twilight walks, and I'm realizing that I love dogs. I didn't before, but I had to get a dog to walk at midnight. And I spend a lot of time with this dog in a garden, which is very hard because I'm not a bug person. I don't like outdoors, but I do garden a lot. I spend a lot of time doing that. And I just take breaks from, if it gets so heavy that I'm having a hard time carrying it, the writing, I take breaks and do those things.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to ask some questions. Maybe, is it possible to raise the lights a little bit so that I can see that there are human people out there? Or no, that seems, okay, there you are. Hello, humans. Nice to see you. Does anyone have a question? Yeah, in the front here. Yeah, there's, Natalie's coming with the mic. Oh, no, over here. Okay. Yeah, there you go.
Thanks. Well, my question is for Anthony Cody, specifically about the poetry writing process. In writing poetry, is staying on topic or staying on rhythm, what, if anything, has to be left out of this story?
When specifically thinking through this project, one of the things that I definitely leaned on was that group of friends to share the work with, only because if I'm writing about violences and I have this like cool idea for like a poem, I also have to like understand that my conceit of the idea should not take precedent. It's that history. So I'm not like reenacting a violence or maybe escalating the violence. It was, if one looks through this book, there's only 2 moments in which an actual human being lynched is in the book, and both of them are very tiny, and that was a very intentional thing. I didn't want to be another perpetrator of like sharing that image, because obviously they were not someone that perhaps I was related to. But I think for me, what I'm always thinking through is that balance of the archive and my own voice, of where the two kind of can find a marriage that feels right, that's honoring both the history and something that I want to put out there in the world, and just kind of working that through. Thanks.
Thanks. All right. I'm going to go over here, and then I see you all come back. I just don't want to give all my attention to the middle. Okay.
This question is mostly for Borderland, Apocrypha, and Legend of Auntie Poe. But what ways do you find the image that you're working with in both works, and how that affects the words in which you use alongside them, but also the give and take of both?
The question's about the relationship between the image and the, like, how does the image that you've made relate to the language that goes on the page and things like that? Am I getting your question fully? Okay.
Sorry, I had to think about that for a second. I mean, I'm a graphic novelist, so images and words are just sort of necessarily interlinked in a non-negotiable way. But what I really love about the use of basically writing comics is how you get to communicate so much in images. Like, you get to do things where the words are actually contradictory to what you see, and that, is a whole fun way of playing with language. You get to insert like pauses, like lots of side eyes. That's a really fun thing to do. Sorry, I kind of got a little bit lost there because I was like, well, it's words and pictures. That is the genre and medium I work in, and I just haven't had to think about it that much before.
Yeah.
Does one come before the other for you?
For me, I write a script first, but as I am writing the script, I'm also thinking about the layout of the page. And I actually do feel that a lot of my storytelling takes place in page layout. And as I am laying out each page and deciding what panels go where, what's happening at any given time, I also have to go back and revise the script because the script changes throughout that process. So they're very much like, they're kind of the same thing to me. They're both ways to tell a story.
And for me, I think of it like, I think we think of like signs, symbols in sort of maybe like a evolutionary way that's maybe incorrectly thought of. Like I think of like symbol as word. I think of symbol as cave drawing. I think of symbol as glyph. I think of symbol as codex. I think of symbol as oral histories. Right? So like for me, they're all kind of happening in the same time on top of one another. So when I think about the image, I think it's having to do its own work. And my poem, or the part of the archive in which I'm like drawing from and placing on a page, has to also sort of be in conversation with one another and maybe not be like a direct retelling of what I'm showing. Right? Because then then I'm just repeating what all the information you've taken in as reading that symbol of that image, and I'm not doing that symbol any more justice than the image is doing for itself. So that's kind of how I look at it. It's all in tandem.
Thank you. All right, you had your hand up here in the middle, and then I'm gonna look for you all over here. You better have somebody. Let's think of a question.
Okay, my question is for LaToya. We touched on like the importance of geographic location when it comes to your writing. I was curious what home means to you, what it means to have a home, and what the importance of having a home might be.
I think that's a good question. That's an interesting question. As much as I love Texas and think of it as home, if my parents, my partner, my children, my sisters moved away, I would feel homeless. So I think home, people, it's people to me. So when I talk about writing about geographic location, Texas for me is people. I'm not just, all of the stories aren't set in Texas, but all of the people are Texans or Texas, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, you're up over here. All right, I see in the front. I think it's a red sweater. Yeah. Got Natalie getting her steps in. All right.
Hi. So I was wondering for all three of you, when you are putting together a project, how do you assemble a theme, or how do you find a theme? Or is it something that you intuit and honor naturally?
For me, I was just doing research. I was writing poems separate from the research. It wasn't even about what went into this book. And it actually, in those poems, the first poems that I read, that's actually when I realized, oh wait, this is all collapsed on itself. And at that point, it kind of clicked for me. I was able to say, okay, this is how I sort of constellate this collection. This is me here in the Walgreens line. And then now I have to jump back to the histories and then kind of come up to the future. So it kind of, that moment, that aha was there with the man asking me why I was getting a passport photo, kind of just, and 15-year-old me probably would have punched him. But also, I don't know if what would have happened. I probably would have laughed too, because I didn't know if, I guess, even to this day, I don't know if it was something said out of like racism or just like, a joke of just, hey, where are you trying to go to, buddy? But it was said in a way in my space that I was like, oh, this isn't good. And instead, I just took my photo and I left.
Yeah, for me, I also just tend to do research. I just tend to like chase, special interest and let the themes come out of that. But honestly, like I write middle grade literature, so a lot of them are just going to be coming of age stories where, my protagonists are dealing with finding their place in the world, they're dealing with their sexuality, they're dealing with their family. And I don't mean to be like so hand-wavy about it, but I'm like, these are the themes that I enjoy writing about, and they're gonna come up over and over again, and the rest of it often feels like set dressing. And that's what my special interests are leading me to.
I think for me, it's kind of the same thing, the research, because when I think I know what I want to write about, when I think I know the story I want to write, it never ends up being that story. So I kind of let that guide me. I let the situation, the characters guide me to the story, just kind of follow wherever they take me.
Thank you. We have time for one more? Okay, one more question. Yeah.
Oh, no, I saw your hand.
Oh, do you want to ask one, Natalie? Is that what you're saying? Yeah. Okay.
Hi. So I had a question, since you all are dealing with intersectionalism of post-colonialism. We're currently living in a time where America is committing and contributing to genocides across the world, such as Palestine, Sudan, multiple Middle Eastern countries, and all of you touch on these themes of intersectionality with the idea of borderlessness. And I would love if each of you would maybe contribute a little bit of that thought process to how can we intersect our liberation and our resistance within the themes that we're creating in these books. How can we fight?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's one of those things I struggle with, right? Like, will a poem save us? And I think every day I know that a poem will save us and give us something to go and act. So it's like the doorway. I think of the book and our work and our writing and our imagination as being that opportunity for us to imagine a better place than whatever we are being inherited through this empire colonialist project we're being forced to inherit. So I think of that as I don't know if the poem will save us per se today, but it gives us something so we can actually go and actually make the change. So it's like just step one.
Yeah, I mean, I'm from a very colonized country. Like my hometown of Malacca, Malaysia, was colonized by the British, the Dutch, the Portuguese also. So I kind of grew up, just thinking a lot about colonialism. And for me, I don't think that literature is going to save us. I think that is something that, direct action is going to save us. All this, feels like theory, but I'm interested in practicum. But I think, art gives us something to fight for. Like, what's the point of fighting if, at the end of it, all you have is a bunch of AI-generated schlock at the end of it. We want art in our lives. That's what makes it worth living, worth fighting.
Yeah, I think I agree with doing the work, even doing the work of being informed, educating, and telling the stories that maybe aren't being told, but also doing the work outside of that, like putting things into practice outside of literature.
Great, thank you. All right, thank you all so much for being here tonight. Thank you all for your questions and also for being here. One more round of applause, please, for our guests.
Thank you for your questions.
Thank you for going back here. Do you want to say anything about instructions?
So we're going to be right back here for the book signing. If you haven't already grabbed your copy, there's a table right by the door. Oh, lovely waves of hands.
Oh, they're waving.
And we'll help you all line up right here in front of the book signing table. Thank you so much for coming, and thank you, Lacy, for moderating.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is starting. This is starting to irritate my
It's irritating you? Oh my gosh. I couldn't tell.
Untape ourselves?
You did great.